The policy that I chose to research is the Presidential Records Act. This policy has to do with the President of the United States, but it also affects the general public. So it's directed towards the federal government and also the general population. Imagine yourself sitting at school, work, driving in the car, at home, and suddenly you get a notification on your phone, the TV, the radio, etc. And another country has just gotten the codes for nuclear bombs in the United States, and they have just activated them. The President of the United States has decided to take highly classified and extremely restricted documents from the National Archives and Records Administration, which is also known as NARA, and leak them to another country. I still remember when 9/11 happened and how terrifying that was to me and how devastating it was to our country. If nuclear bombs were to be set off, it could be even worse. Having classified materials in an insecure location could put our nation at risk. According to CNN, Lobosco says, information is classified as top secret if it reasonably could be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to the national security. If something's top secret, it should never leave NARA. The President of the United States should not be allowed to take presidential records from the National Archives and Records Administration. According to archives.gov, in 1978, Congress passed the Presidential Records Act, which states that any records created or received by the President as part of his constitutional, statutory, or ceremonial duties are the property of the United States government and will be managed by NARA at the end of the administration. The Presidential Records Act changed the legal status of presidential and vice presidential materials. Under the PRA, the official records of the president and his staff are owned by the United States, not by the president. So the president doesn't own any of the documents, which in turn should mean he shouldn't be allowed to take them or destroy them. If there's no record of the document or it disappears, there would be no way to hold someone accountable. According to lawfareblog.com, Langford and Newland said, most notably, Congress should amend the PRA to entirely eliminate the president's ability to destroy presidential records while in office. The risk that doing so would preserve records of little value is far outweighed by the risk that an abusive president will destroy evidence of wrongdoing. So what is stopping someone from destroying documents other than the threat of possibly going to prison, especially when no one else has ever been held accountable for doing the same? The Department of Justice should take the violation of the Presidential Records Act more seriously. There have been multiple people accused of violating the Presidential Records Act, but no one has ever faced any penalties. According to Channel 13, Wham.com, Bowen says, Reagan is just one of many presidents, including George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush, accused of trying to hide government records, but none faced criminal penalties. If no one faces criminal penalties for violating the Presidential Records Act, what's the point of having the law? The penalty for violating the Presidential Records Act is not big enough to encourage someone to not take classified documents. 3 years in prison and a fine for violating the Presidential Records Act does not seem like a fitting punishment for taking top secret records that could potentially get into the wrong hands. When something is considered classified or top secret, there's a reason for it. For something to be in that category, it's usually something that if the wrong person saw it, could affect the lives of others. The president should be held to a higher standard than anyone. However, just because someone is the president doesn't mean they will act in good faith or have the country's best interest at heart. Langford and Newland also said, today, the most persistent PRA problems stem from the lack of meaningful enforcement mechanisms and the statute's reliance on a president who acts in good faith. A president may be more concerned about protecting themselves and how they are viewed over what may be best for the nation. When the president takes office, he takes on an oath saying they will do their best to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. If someone's more concerned about protecting themselves than upholding the law, they probably shouldn't be the president. Imagine for a second that the president had some documents that were highly classified. He decides he doesn't think that they need to be classified anymore and changes the status of them and takes them home with him. Should there be a punishment for that? Should the process of declassifying documents be clearer without room for interpretation? If the president can personally choose to declassify a document, then he has the power to take information that he should never have from the National Archives and Records Administration. According to the American Bar Association, Jacobson said, "The official documents governing classification and declassification stem from executive orders. But even those executive orders aren't necessarily binding on the president. The president is not obliged to follow any procedures other than those that he himself has prescribed," Aftergood said, "and he can change those. There's way too many loopholes for someone to get around. Things need to be more clear and precise for something of this magnitude." A nuclear weapon could destroy a city and kill most of the people in it. Several explosions or nuclear war would kill hundreds of millions of people. According to the Federation of American Scientists, FASS said, approximately 90% of all nuclear warheads are owned by Russia and the United States, who each have around 4,000 warheads in their military stockpiles. No other nuclear armed state sees a need for more than a few hundred nuclear weapons for national security. Imagine if another country had control of not only their own, but now the United States nuclear weapons. That could be detrimental for our country. And I believe this is why a president should never be able to take presidential records from the National Archives and Records Administration.